My husband wanted my sister as his hall pass, so I took his brother as mine. The conversation started innocently enough over dinner. Beckham had been scrolling through articles about open marriages when he casually mentioned how evolved some couples were becoming. What if we tried something like that? He said, cutting his steak. Just to spice things up. I nearly choked on my wine. After 8 years of marriage, this was his solution to our bedroom rut? Like what exactly? I asked. He grinned. A hall pass, one night each, no questions asked. I waited for the punchline. When none came, I realized he was serious. And who exactly did you have in mind? His pause told me everything. Then he said her name, my sister. The sister who'd been staying with us for 3 months after her divorce. The sister who walked around our house in tiny pajamas and always seemed to need Beckham's help reaching things on high shelves. The sister who giggled at his jokes like he was some kind of comedian instead of a mediocre insurance adjuster with dad jokes. She's vulnerable right now, I said quietly. And she's my sister. That's what makes it perfect, he replied. No emotional complications, just physical. I stared at him across our dining room table, the one we'd picked out together, in the house we'd saved for together, and realized I was looking at a stranger. Fine, I said, but I get to pick yours. His eyes lit up. Really? Who? I smiled sweetly. Kieran. His brother's name hit him like cold water. Kieran, the successful architect. Kieran, who'd always been the golden child. Kieran, who women flocked to at every family gathering, while Beckham stood in his shadow. You can't be serious, he stammered. Why not? No emotional complications, right? Just physical. I watched his face cycle through emotions. Shock, anger, jealousy. Everything he'd expected me to feel about my sister. That's different, he said weakly. How? He couldn't answer, because there was no answer. His fantasy only worked when he was the one getting something better. That night, I texted Kieran. We'd always had an easy friendship, and he'd made no secret about finding Beckham insufferable. When I explained the situation, his response was immediate. Your husband is an idiot. When do we start? The next morning, Beckham woke up full of apologies and backtracking, but it was too late. I'd already seen who he really was, and I'd tasted something I hadn't felt in years. The thrill of being truly wanted. Kieran picked me up that Friday in his Porsche. We didn't go to a hotel. We went to his penthouse apartment overlooking the city. As he poured wine, I felt more alive than I had in years. You deserve better than him, Kieran said, his hand touching mine. I kissed him, hard, desperate. 8 years of feeling invisible melted away. When I came home Sunday morning, Beckham was pacing our living room. My sister sat on the couch looking uncomfortable. Where were you? He demanded. Using my hall pass, I said calmly. How was yours? His face crumpled. She turned me down, said it felt wrong. I looked at my sister, who nodded apologetically. I'm sorry. I just couldn't. Relief and pride washed over me. My sister had standards, even if my husband didn't. So what now? Beckham asked quietly. I pulled out my phone and showed him the video Kieran had sent that morning. His brother, shirtless in bed, saying, Tell my little brother I said thanks for sharing. Beckham's face went white. Now, I said, you learn what consequences feel like. That's when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw the process server walking up our driveway with papers that would change everything. The process server was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who'd probably delivered thousands of divorce papers. She glanced between Beckham and me with practiced indifference. Mrs. Haley Cross? She asked. That's me. She handed me a thick manila envelope. You've been served. My sister's eyes widened. Beckham looked confused. Served with what? He asked. I tore open the envelope, though I already knew what I'd find. Kieran worked fast. Divorce papers, I said, scanning the first page. Filed this morning. What? Beckham lunged forward. You can't. We need to talk about this. We did talk. Friday night, you told me you wanted to sleep with my sister. Sunday morning, I decided I wanted a better life. The papers were thorough. Kieran had connected me with his law firm's best divorce attorney, apparently. They were citing irreconcilable differences and seeking an equitable distribution of assets. My sister stood up. Maybe I should go. No, I said firmly. Stay. You're part of this story. Beckham was reading over my shoulder, his face getting redder by the minute. This is insane, he said. You're throwing away 8 years over one conversation? One conversation where you told me you've been fantasizing about my sister. One conversation where you made it clear you think I'm not enough for you. One conversation where you revealed exactly who you really are. But you slept with my brother. After you gave me permission. After you suggested it. After you made it clear our marriage was a business transaction where you got to trade up. The process server cleared her throat. Ma'am, you'll need to sign here acknowledging receipt. I signed with a flourish. After she left, Beckham slumped into his favorite recliner. The ugly brown one I'd been trying to get rid of for 3 years. This is really happening, he said quietly. It really is. My sister sat back down looking stunned. When did you plan all this? Saturday morning, I said. Kieran introduced me to his attorney over breakfast. Turns out she specializes in cases where husbands make spectacularly stupid decisions. You were with him all weekend? Beckham's voice cracked. I was. And you know what? It wasn't just physical. We talked. About books, about travel, about dreams. Things you and I stopped doing years ago. That wasn't entirely true. Kieran and I had spent most of Saturday in bed, making up for 8 years of marriage to someone who looked at me like furniture. But we had talked, too. Real conversations that made me remember what it felt like to be interesting to someone. So, what happens now? My sister asked. I looked around our living room, the beige walls I'd wanted to paint, the coffee table covered in Beckham's sports magazines, the wedding photos that suddenly looked like evidence of a crime scene. Now I start over. My phone buzzed. A text from Kieran. How did it go? I typed back. He's been served. Want to celebrate? His response was immediate. Already making dinner reservations. Beckham saw me smiling at my phone. You're really doing this? He said. You're really choosing him? I'm choosing me, I corrected. For the first time in 8 years, I'm choosing what I want instead of what's convenient or expected or safe. That evening, after my sister had retreated to her room and Beckham had locked himself in his man cave, I packed a bag, just enough for a few days while I figured out what came next. I was folding clothes when Beckham appeared in our bedroom doorway. "We could try counseling," he said desperately. "We could work through this." I paused, holding the red dress I'd bought last year but never worn because Beckham said it was too flashy. "You wanted to sleep with my sister," I said simply. "There's no counseling through that. It was just a fantasy. Guys have fantasies. And when you have fantasies about other women, you keep them to yourself. You don't suggest your wife arrange a hall pass so you can act them out." I zipped up my suitcase. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Kieran's." "For how long?" I met his eyes. "As long as he'll have me." The drive to Kieran's penthouse felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in years. My phone kept buzzing. Texts from Beckham ranging from apologetic to angry to bargaining. I turned it off. Kieran was waiting in his lobby when I arrived, still wearing the suit from whatever important architect meeting he'd been in. He took my suitcase without a word and led me upstairs. "How are you feeling?" he asked as his elevator climbed to the 20th floor. "Terrified," I admitted. "But good terrified. Like jumping out of a plane?" "I've done that," he said. "The first few seconds are pure terror. Then it's the most alive you'll ever feel." His apartment was exactly what I'd expected from someone who'd never had to compromise on their vision. Clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, art that probably cost more than my car. Everything Beckham would have called pretentious. "Are you hungry?" Kieran asked. I made reservations at Meridian. Meridian was the kind of restaurant Beckham said was overpriced and snooty. The kind of place I'd always wanted to try. I'd love that. Over dinner, Kieran told me about his latest project, a sustainable housing development that would revolutionize affordable living. His eyes lit up when he talked about solar panels and rainwater collection systems. When was the last time Beckham had been passionate about anything besides beer and fantasy football? "What about you?" Kieran asked over dessert. "What do you want to do with your life now that you're free?" The question hit me like a physical blow. When was the last time anyone had asked me what I wanted? "I don't know," I said honestly. "I've been Mrs. Beckham Cross for so long, I'm not sure who Haley is anymore. Then we'll figure it out together." The casual way he said "we" made my chest tight. Beckham had never talked about our future like that. Like it was something we were building together instead of something that was just happening to us. That night, lying next to Kieran in his king-sized bed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, showed 17 missed calls from Beckham and 43 text messages. The most recent one, sent at 2 a.m., just said, "Please come home." But this was starting to feel like home. The next morning, Kieran made coffee in a machine that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. Everything he did was deliberate, thoughtful. He asked how I liked my eggs instead of assuming I wanted them scrambled like Beckham always did. "I need to go back to the house today," I said. "Get some things. Face the music." "Want me to come with you?" The idea of showing up at my marital home with my husband's brother was both terrifying and appealing. Better not. But thank you. Call if you need backup. The drive back to suburbia felt like returning to a past life. Everything looked smaller, bigger, more boring than I remembered. Our little colonial house with its standard-issue mailbox and HOA-approved landscaping looked like a museum exhibit. Average American marriage, circa 2015-2023. Beckham's car was in the driveway, which meant he'd called in sick to work. Probably the first time in 5 years he'd used a personal day for anything other than fantasy football playoffs. I found him at the kitchen table, still wearing yesterday's clothes, surrounded by photo albums. "I've been looking through these all night," he said without looking up. "Remember our honeymoon? We were so happy." I glanced at the photos spread across the table. Young faces, genuine smiles, a future that seemed limitless. When had we stopped looking at each other like that? "We were," I agreed. "But that was a long time ago. It doesn't have to be." My sister appeared in the doorway, overnight bag in hand. "I'm going to stay with Mom for a while," she announced. "Give you 2 space to figure this out. You don't have to leave," I said. "Yes, I do. This mess started with me." "No," I said firmly. "This mess started with him." I pointed at Beckham, who was still staring at our honeymoon photos like they were legal documents that could reverse time. "None of this is your fault," I told my sister. "You said no when he approached you. You did the right thing. I should have told you immediately. Why didn't you?" She glanced at Beckham, then back at me. "Because I knew it would destroy your marriage." My marriage was already destroyed. I just didn't know it yet. After my sister left with promises to call later, Beckham and I sat across from each other at the same table where this had all started 3 days ago. "I talked to a counselor this morning," he said. "Dr. Reeves. She has an opening Thursday." "I'm not interested in counseling. Just 1 session. What could it hurt?" I studied his face. The man I'd fallen in love with at 23, married at 25, and slowly grown apart from over 8 years of routine and compromise and taking each other for granted. "What could it hurt?" I repeated. "Beckham, you asked me to arrange a threesome with my sister. You don't recover from that in therapy." "It wasn't a threesome, it was a hall pass." "That's worse. A threesome would have at least included me." He flinched. "You wanted permission to cheat on me with my sister while I sat at home waiting for you to come back and tell me how great she was in bed. I didn't think it through. That's the problem. You didn't think at all. You saw an opportunity to upgrade and you took it. Is that what you did with Kieran? Upgrade?" The question hung in the air between us. Was that what I'd done? Traded my insurance adjuster husband for his architect brother? "No," I said finally. "I chose someone who sees me as a person instead of a service provider. I see you as a person." When? When was the last time you asked about my day and actually listened to the answer? When was the last time you suggested we try something new together? When was the last time you looked at me and smiled just because you were happy I was there? He couldn't answer. "I need to pack some things," I said. Upstairs in our bedroom, former bedroom, I filled 2 suitcases with clothes, books, and the jewelry my grandmother had left me. Photos of my family, but not the wedding pictures. Those belonged to a different person. Beckham appeared in the doorway. "The attorney called," he said, "about the papers you had served." "What about them?" "She said we could try mediation instead of going to court. Split everything amicably." "That's probably smart. Is there anything that would make you change your mind?" I zipped up my second suitcase and turned to face him. "Would you change your mind if I told you I wanted a hall pass with your brother? If I said I'd been fantasizing about him for years and just needed one night to get it out of my system?" His face went pale. "That's different." "How?" Because you're my wife, and you're my husband. Or you were, until you decided I wasn't enough for you anymore." I carried my suitcases downstairs. Beckham followed like a lost puppy. "So that's it?" he asked as I loaded my car. 8 years over, just like that? 8 years that ended the moment you said my sister's name. I drove away without looking back. Kieran was waiting for me when I got back to his apartment. Takeout containers from my favorite Thai place spread across his dining table. "How did it go?" he asked. "About as well as you'd expect." He pulled out my chair for me, something Beckham had stopped doing approximately 7 years ago. "He wants to try counseling," I said as Kieran served pad thai onto my plate. "What do you want?" Another question no one had asked me in years. "I want to not feel guilty for choosing myself for once." "Why would you feel guilty?" "Because good wives are supposed to work harder to save their marriages. They're supposed to forgive and compromise and try counseling. Good wives also deserve husbands who don't fantasize about their sisters." We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Through his floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled below us. All those lights, all those lives, all those possibilities I'd never considered while I was busy being Mrs. Beckham Cross. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Anything." "Did you ever think about me before all this?" Kieran set down his fork and looked at me seriously. "Every family gathering for the past 5 years." "Really? Really?" You'd laugh at something and your whole face would light up, and I'd think about how my brother was the luckiest man alive. Then he'd make some comment about how you needed to lose weight or how you talked too much or how you spent too much money, and I'd want to punch him. He said I talked too much? At last year's Christmas party. You were telling that story about the time you got lost in Venice, and he cut you off to tell everyone about some football trade. I wanted to finish hearing about Venice. I remembered that. I'd been excited to share the story about getting gloriously lost in Venice's winding streets and discovering a tiny gelato shop where the owner taught me to make real Italian coffee. Beckham had rolled his eyes and changed the subject to sports, like he always did when I talked about travel or books or anything that wasn't directly relevant to our suburban life. "What happened after I got lost?" Kieran asked. I smiled, remembering. "I found this little cafe tucked between 2 buildings, no bigger than a closet. The owner was this ancient Italian man who didn't speak a word of English, but he spent 2 hours teaching me to make perfect espresso. His wife brought out homemade biscotti, and we sat there communicating entirely through gestures and laughter. That sounds magical." It was. One of the best afternoons of my life. Beckham never let you finish that story. He said it was boring, that no one cared about some random coffee shop. Kieran shook his head. "I would have listened to you talk about that coffee shop for hours." Something warm spread through my chest. When was the last time someone had been genuinely interested in my experiences, my stories, my thoughts? "What else?" I asked. "What else what? What else did you notice? What else did he do that made you want to punch him?" Kieran hesitated. "You don't have to spare my feelings," I said. "I'm discovering that my marriage was worse than I realized." "Your birthday last year? You mentioned wanting to take a cooking class, and he laughed. Said you already knew how to cook and it would be a waste of money." I remembered that too. Le Cordon Bleu was offering a weekend series on French pastries. I'd been excited about learning something new, meeting new people, developing a skill that was just for me. Beckham had dismissed it immediately. "Then at Easter, you wore that yellow dress. He said it made me look like a banana. You looked beautiful, radiant, and he spent the entire day making jokes about your outfit instead of telling you how stunning you were." Each memory was a small cut, accumulating into a larger wound. How many times had Beckham diminished me without me fully realizing it? How many times had I swallowed my interests, my enthusiasm, my joy, because he found it silly, or expensive, or impractical? "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I asked. "Because you were married to my brother. Because I thought you were happy. Because I'm not the kind of person who breaks up marriages. But you are the kind of person who sleeps with your brother's wife?" He met my eyes. "I'm the kind of person who gives a woman what she deserves when her husband is too stupid to appreciate her." The heat in his voice made my pulse quicken. "And what is it that I deserve?" He reached across the table and took my hand. "Everything," he said simply. "You deserve everything." Later that night, as we lay tangled in his sheets, I thought about the last time Beckham and I had made love. Really made love. Not just the perfunctory Saturday morning routine that had become our norm. It had been months. Maybe longer. We'd become roommates who shared a mortgage and a Netflix account. With Kieran, I felt like a woman again instead of a function. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another text from Beckham. "I keep thinking about our wedding day. You were so beautiful. I was so proud to call you my wife. Can we please try to save what we had?" I showed the text to Kieran. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about the difference between loving someone and being proud to own them." Explain. On our wedding day, he was proud to call me his wife. But when did he last tell me he loved me? Not that he loved having me there to cook dinner and do laundry and remember his mother's birthday. When did he last love me for who I am? Kieran traced patterns on my bare shoulder. "I love that you tell stories about getting lost in Venice. I love that you want to learn to make French pastries. I love that you wear yellow dresses even when small-minded people make banana jokes. You barely know me. I know you better than he does." It was true, and that realization hit me like cold water. After 8 years of marriage, Kieran, who I'd seen maybe once a month at family gatherings, understood me better than my own husband. "I want to show you something," I said. I retrieved my laptop from my purse and pulled up a folder I'd hidden deep in my files. Photos from the past 3 years. Not the posed family pictures or vacation snapshots that made it onto social media. The real moments. Me at a bookstore, face lit up with excitement over a new novel. Beckham in the background checking his phone. Me laughing at something my friend Lauren said during our girls' night out. Pure joy captured in a single frame. Me in the garden, dirt under my nails, completely absorbed in planting herbs. I'd forgotten Beckham was even taking the picture. These are who you really are, Kieran said, scrolling through the images. Not the woman who apologizes for taking up space. Is that what I do? Constantly. You apologize for talking too long, for wanting things, for having opinions. You make yourself smaller to fit into the space he's decided you should occupy. He was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd learned to shrink myself to avoid conflict, to keep peace, to be the easygoing wife who didn't cause problems. I don't want to be small anymore, I said. Then don't be. The next morning, Kieran made breakfast while I called my best friend Lauren. I hadn't talked to her in weeks. Beckham always made snide comments about her being high maintenance because she was divorced and dating and living her life unapologetically. Holy shit, Lauren said when I explained the situation. You're leaving him? I left him. Past tense. And you're with Kieran? Hot architect Kieran? That's not the point. It's absolutely the point. You've been married to Mr. Vanilla for 8 years. You deserve some chocolate. Lauren, I'm serious. Remember when we were 25 and you had all those plans? You wanted to travel, learn languages, maybe go back to school for art history. What happened to all that? I knew what had happened. Marriage happened. Mortgages and compromise and the slow erosion of dreams in favor of stability. It's not too late, Lauren continued. You're 31, not 91. You can still do all those things. After I hung up, Kieran emerged from his kitchen with perfectly prepared eggs Benedict and fresh squeezed orange juice. That smelled like an important conversation, he said. Lauren reminded me that I used to have dreams. What kind of dreams? I felt embarrassed saying it out loud. I wanted to get my master's in art history, maybe work at a museum, travel to see famous artworks in person instead of just reading about them in books. That sounds amazing. Beckham said it was impractical, that we needed to focus on building equity and saving for retirement. What do you want to focus on now? Another impossible question. What did I want? I want to see the Mona Lisa, I said impulsively. I've wanted to see it in person since I was 12 years old. Then let's go. I laughed. You can't just decide to go to Paris. Why not? I have vacation days. You're unemployed. My passport is current. He was serious. Kieran, I can't let you— Let me what? Take a trip with a beautiful woman who deserves to see the Mona Lisa? It's too much. Too fast. Too what? Too good to be true? Too spontaneous? Too much like actually living your life instead of just existing in it? I stared at him. In the space of 4 days, he'd shown me more consideration, more genuine interest, more respect than Beckham had in the past 4 years. What about work? I asked weakly. I'm the boss. The perks of working for yourself. What about the divorce proceedings? They'll still be there when we get back. What about— He silenced me with a kiss. Say yes, he murmured against my lips. Just once. Say yes to something your heart wants instead of finding reasons why you can't have it. Yes, I whispered. And just like that, I was going to Paris. That afternoon, while Kieran made arrangements with his travel agent, I drove back to my house to tell my sister about the trip. She was packing up her room, preparing to move to Mom's. Paris? She squeaked. You're going to Paris? Tomorrow? Is that crazy? It's insane. It's impulsive. She paused, studying my face. It's the happiest I've seen you in years. Really? Really? You're glowing. I caught my reflection in her bedroom mirror. She was right. There was something different about my face, a lightness I hadn't seen since before my wedding. Are you sure about this? My sister asked. About Kieran? About ending your marriage? I'm sure about not staying in a marriage where my husband fantasizes about you. She winced. I still can't believe he said that. Believe it. And you did exactly the right thing by turning him down. What if he tries something like this again? With someone else? Then that's the next woman's problem to solve. I can't stay married to prevent him from making bad decisions. My sister hugged me tight. I'm proud of you, she said, for choosing yourself, even though it means our family is going to be weird at every holiday forever, especially because of that. That evening, as I packed for Paris, Beckham called. Can we meet for coffee? He asked. Just to talk? I'm leaving for Paris tomorrow. Silence on the other end. With him? Beckham said finally. Yes. For how long? A week. A week in Paris. His voice was flat. On our anniversary. I'd forgotten. Our 8th wedding anniversary was in 3 days. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't sure why I was apologizing. Are you really sorry? Or are you exactly where you want to be? It was a fair question. I'm exactly where I want to be, I admitted. Then I guess there's nothing left to say. I guess not. After I hung up, I felt something unexpected. Relief. For the first time since this all started, Beckham and I had been completely honest with each other. Kieran found me sitting on his couch, staring out at the city lights. Second thoughts? He asked. No, first thoughts. Real thoughts. About how marriage should make you more yourself, not less. About how love should add to your life, not subtract from it. He sat beside me and pulled me close. Tell me about the version of yourself you've been hiding, he said. So I did. I told him about the art history classes I'd audited in college, how I dreamed of working at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I told him about the novels I'd stopped reading because Beckham said fiction was a waste of time. I told him about the cooking classes I'd wanted to take, the languages I'd wanted to learn, the places I'd wanted to see. We'll see them all, he said simply. You can't promise that. I can promise to try. I can promise to support whatever dreams you have instead of talking you out of them. That night, I called my mom to tell her about the divorce and the trip to Paris. I expected lectures about commitment and working things out and not making hasty decisions. Instead, she was quiet for a long moment. You know, she said finally, I never liked Beckham. What? I never said anything because you seemed happy at first. But he never seemed to really see you. Why didn't you tell me? Because you had to figure it out for yourself. And you did. Are you disappointed in me? I'm proud of you. It takes courage to admit you made a mistake. It takes even more courage to fix it. After I hung up, I cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. The people who really loved me supported my decision to choose happiness over obligation. The flight to Paris was a revelation. Kieran had upgraded us to business class, and I'd never experienced anything like it. Real silverware, actual food instead of peanuts, seats that reclined into beds. You didn't have to do all this, I said as the flight attendant brought us champagne. I wanted to. You deserve first-class everything. I've never flown business class before. Beckham was cheap? Beckham was practical. He said paying extra for a slightly bigger seat was throwing money away. What else did Beckham think was throwing money away? I thought about it as we climbed toward cruising altitude. Fresh flowers, fancy restaurants, name brand anything. New clothes unless the old ones had holes, books I could get from the library, art for the walls, pretty much anything that made life more beautiful instead of just functional. He sounds like a joy to live with. He wasn't always like that. When we were dating, he'd surprise me with flowers and nice dinners. But after we got married, after you were locked in, he stopped trying. It was exactly what had happened. The man who'd courted me with romantic gestures had disappeared the moment I'd signed a marriage certificate. Tell me about your first trip to Paris, Kieran said. This is my first trip to Paris. His eyebrows shot up. Seriously? You've never been? Beckham said Europe was overpriced and overrated. We went to Florida for our honeymoon. Florida. Disney World specifically, because it was practical and affordable and we could use his timeshare points. Kieran shook his head in amazement. What other places have you never been? I made a mental list. Italy, Spain, Greece, London, Ireland, Scotland, pretty much everywhere I've ever wanted to go. We'll fix that. You can't take me on a world tour, Kieran. Watch me. He was serious. This man I barely knew was talking about showing me the world while my husband of 8 years had barely shown me outside our home state. Why? I asked. Why would you do all this for me? Because you light up when you talk about the places you want to see. Because life is short and beauty matters. Because watching you discover the world will be better than any vacation I could take alone. I fell asleep somewhere over the Atlantic, my head on his shoulder, dreaming of Parisian cafes and the Louvre, and a life bigger than anything I'd ever imagined. We landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport on a crisp October morning. Paris in autumn was everything I'd pictured. Golden leaves, gray stone building, the smell of coffee and pastries in the air. Kieran had booked us a suite at a boutique hotel in the 7th arrondissement, walking distance from the Eiffel Tower. The room was small by American standards, but impossibly elegant, with tall windows that opened onto wrought iron balconies and a view of Parisian rooftops. It's perfect, I breathed, stepping onto the balcony. You're perfect, he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. We spent that first day wandering the city like tourists, but like tourists with unlimited time and budget. We had café au lait and croissants at a sidewalk cafe. We browsed bookstalls along the Seine. We climbed the Eiffel Tower at sunset and watched the city spread out below us like a jeweled map. Tomorrow we'll go to the Louvre, Kieran said as we walked back to our hotel. See your Mona Lisa. I can't believe this is real, I said. Which part? All of it. This trip, this city, you. 5 days ago, I was married to a man who thought my dreams were impractical. Now I'm in Paris with someone who books flights to make them come true. Maybe you married the wrong brother. It was a joke, but it hit close to the truth. Maybe I had. That night, we made love in our Parisian hotel room with the windows open and the sounds of the city drifting up from the street below. Afterward, I lay in Kieran's arms and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete contentment. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Beckham. Happy anniversary, hey. I hope you know what you're giving up. I showed the message to Kieran. Do you? He asked. Know what you're giving up? I thought about it seriously. What was I giving up? A mortgage on a house I'd never loved, a husband who diminished my dreams, a life of quiet compromise and slow suffocation. I'm giving up safety, I said finally. Predictability, the known quantity. Regrets? None. I deleted Beckham's message without responding. The next morning we walked to the Louvre. I'd seen pictures of the glass pyramid, but standing beneath it was breathtaking. We bypassed the crowds heading for the famous pieces and wandered through the quieter galleries first. Kieran watched me as much as he watched the art. What? I asked when I caught him staring. You get this look when you see something beautiful. Your face goes completely still, and your eyes go wide, like you're trying to memorize every detail. I want to remember all of this. You will. We found the Mona Lisa in her climate-controlled chamber, surrounded by crowds and security guards. She was smaller than I'd expected, but more mysterious in person. I stood there for 20 minutes just looking. What do you think? Kieran asked. I think I understand why people travel across the world to see her. Photos don't capture the way she seems to be looking directly at you. Like she knows your secrets. Like she approves of them. We spent the entire day at the Louvre. Kieran was endlessly patient as I absorbed 8 centuries of art, reading every placard, studying every brushstroke. He bought me a beautiful coffee table book in the gift shop, something Beckham would have called an expensive waste of space. For when you want to remember this day, Kieran said. That evening we had dinner at a tiny bistro tucked away on a side street. The owner recognized us as Americans and insisted on speaking English, recommending wine and explaining each dish with theatrical enthusiasm. To new adventures, Kieran said, raising his glass. To saying yes, I replied. The wine made me philosophical. Can I tell you something? I asked. Anything. I used to think I was a practical person, responsible, good at making sensible decisions. And now I think I was just scared. Scared of wanting too much, dreaming too big, asking for more than I deserved. What changed? You. The way you look at me like I'm worth extravagant gestures. Like I deserve first-class flights and Parisian hotels and someone who listens when I talk about art. You deserve all of that and more. How do you know? We barely know each other. I know you're kind to servers and patient with tourists. I know you tip generously and say please and thank you in broken French. I know you spend 20 minutes studying a single painting because you find beauty worth your time. I know you're brave enough to blow up your entire life when you realize it's not working. He paused to sip his wine. I know you're worth getting to know better. Later, walking along the Seine under a canopy of stars, I tried to imagine returning to my old life, going back to that beige house, to Saturday morning grocery runs and Sunday afternoon football, to a husband who saw Paris as an expensive waste of money. I couldn't do it. I'm not going back, I said suddenly. Kieran stopped walking. To the hotel? To my marriage? To that life? I'm not going back. Are you sure? Completely. He kissed me there on the banks of the Seine, and I tasted possibility on his lips. The rest of our week in Paris passed like a dream. We visited Versailles and marveled at the excess of kings. We climbed Montmartre and watched artists paint portraits of tourists. We took a cooking class and learned to make perfect French bread. We spent an entire afternoon at Musée d'Orsay, lost in impressionist masterpieces. Every experience was enhanced by Kieran's presence, his genuine enthusiasm for whatever captured my interest. He photographed me in front of every landmark, bought me books from Shakespeare and Company, held my hand through narrow medieval streets. On our last night, we had dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant that would have cost more than Beckham spent on food in a month. Every course was a work of art, and Kieran encouraged me to order the wine pairing despite the ridiculous price. To the most expensive meal of my life, I said, raising my glass. To the beginning of your real life, he corrected. When we returned to Chicago, everything looked different. The airport felt harsh and artificial after a week of Parisian elegance. The drive back to the city seemed gray and uninspiring. Welcome back to reality, I said as we pulled into Kieran's parking garage. This isn't reality, he said. This is just geography. His apartment felt like home in a way my house never had. We unpacked together, and he cleared space in his closet without being asked. Permanent space, not temporary visitor space. Are you sure about this? I asked. About me moving in? I've never been more sure of anything. That evening, I called my divorce attorney to schedule a meeting. Then I called my sister to tell her about Paris. Then I called my mom to say I was happy, genuinely, completely happy, for the first time in years. I didn't call Beckham. 3 days later, he called me. The attorney says you're seeking half of everything, he said without preamble. That's generally how divorce works, including the house. I helped pay for that house for 8 years. But you don't even want it. You're living with my brother in his fancy penthouse. The house will sell. We'll split the proceeds. I'll use my half to start over. Start over doing what? It was a fair question. For the first time in my adult life, I had complete freedom to choose my own path. I'm going back to school, I said. Art history master's program at Northwestern. Silence on the other end. Since when do you want to go back to school? Since always. You just never listened when I talked about it. That's going to be expensive. Good thing I'll have half the proceeds from our house to pay for it. More silence. I can't believe you're throwing away 8 years for some midlife crisis fantasy, he said finally. I can't believe you think getting an education is a fantasy. I can't believe you chose my brother over me. I didn't choose your brother over you. I chose happiness over resignation. I chose growth over stagnation. I chose someone who sees me as a partner instead of a service provider. I never treated you like a service provider. When was the last time you asked about my day and cared about the answer? When was the last time you suggested we try something new together? When was the last time you made me feel like you were lucky to be married to me instead of like I should be grateful you settled for me? He couldn't answer because there was no answer. The papers are fair, I said. Sign them, and we can both move on. What if I don't want to move on? Then you'll be moving on alone either way. I hung up, feeling lighter than I had in months. The divorce proceedings took 6 weeks to finalize. Beckham contested nothing, partly because the settlement was fair, but mostly because his attorney advised him he had no grounds to fight. Asking your wife to arrange infidelity with her sister while you're still married isn't exactly sympathetic plaintiff territory. I used the waiting period productively. I applied to Northwestern's art history program and was accepted for the spring semester. I found a part-time job at a gallery in River North. I started learning French through an app, planning for the next time Kieran and I traveled to Paris. The day our divorce was finalized, Kieran took me to lunch at the same restaurant where we'd had our first official date. We ordered champagne to celebrate. Any regrets? He asked. Only that I waited so long to leave. What's next for us? It was the first time either of us had directly addressed the future. We'd been living day by day, enjoying each other's company without defining what we were building together. What do you want to be next? I asked. I want to travel with you. I want to support your dreams instead of diminishing them. I want to wake up every morning excited to see what adventure you'll suggest. Adventures can be expensive. I can afford adventures. What I can't afford is a boring life. And if the excitement wears off, if you get tired of art museums and language classes and impractical dreams, then I'll know I was wrong about who you are. But I don't think I'm wrong. He reached across the table and took my hand. Marry me, he said simply. I nearly choked on my champagne. What? Marry me. Not now, not tomorrow, but someday. When you're ready. When you trust that I'm nothing like my brother. Kieran, I know it's too soon. I know you just got divorced, but I want you to know my intentions. I'm not playing house with you. I'm not having a midlife crisis affair. I'm falling in love with you, and I want to build a life together. You're falling in love with me? I fell in love with you. Past tense. Probably somewhere between the Louvre and that little bistro where you tried to order dessert in French. I thought about his proposal. Marriage to someone who encouraged my dreams instead of dismissing them. Marriage to someone who planned trips to make my wishes come true. Marriage to someone who saw me as an individual instead of a function. Ask me again in a year, I said. Deal. That Christmas, we hosted Kieran's family for dinner at his apartment. It was awkward at first. I was, after all, the woman who'd left their son and brother for another son and brother. But as the evening wore on, something interesting happened. Kieran's parents started asking me about my graduate program, my job at the gallery, my plans for spring break in Italy. They treated me like a person with interests and opinions. Not just as someone's wife. Beckham showed up an hour late with a girlfriend who looked exactly like my sister but 20 years younger. He seemed determined to prove he'd moved on, but his forced laughter and constant phone checking suggested otherwise. How's school? He asked during a rare moment when we found ourselves alone in the kitchen. Challenging, inspiring, everything I hoped it would be. And the gallery job? I love it. I'm learning about contemporary artists, building relationships with collectors. My boss thinks I have a good eye. That's good. I'm glad you're finding yourself or whatever. His dismissive tone was so familiar I almost laughed. I didn't find myself, Beckham. I stopped hiding myself. When they left that night, Kieran's mother hugged me tightly. You're glowing, dear, she said. Love looks good on you. Thank you. I'm sorry it took my sons this long to see what a treasure you are. Better late than never. That spring, Kieran and I traveled to Italy for my spring break. We spent a week in Florence, studying Renaissance art in the city where it was born. I stood in front of Michelangelo's David and cried actual tears at the perfection of it. Tell me what you're thinking, Kieran said. I'm thinking about how small I used to make my world, how I convinced myself that wanting to see beautiful things was selfish or impractical. And now? Now I think life is too short not to surround yourself with beauty, including beautiful people. I turned to look at him, this man who'd changed the trajectory of my entire life, especially beautiful people. We made love that night in our Florentine hotel room, and afterward, I lay in his arms thinking about the woman I'd been a year ago. That woman couldn't have imagined this life, these experiences, this joy. I have something to tell you, Kieran said into the darkness. What? I bought a ring. My pulse quickened. What kind of ring? The kind you wear on your left hand. The kind that comes with promises and forever. Kieran, I'm not asking yet. You said to ask again in a year, and it's only been 8 months. But I wanted you to know I'm serious about building a future together. What kind of future? The kind where we travel to see every museum in Europe. The kind where you finish your master's degree and maybe get your PhD if you want. The kind where we support each other's dreams instead of talking each other out of them. And if my dreams change, then we'll support the new dreams too. I rolled over to face him in the moonlight streaming through our hotel window. I love you, I said. I'm in love with you. Not because you're better than your brother, but because you're perfect for me. Is that a yes to the proposal I haven't made yet? It's a yes to whatever comes next, as long as we're figuring it out together. 6 months later, Kieran proposed properly. We were back in Paris, our city now, standing on the same bridge where I'd told him I wasn't going back to my old life. He got down on one knee as the sun set over the Seine, and presented me with a ring that was nothing like the modest solitaire Beckham had chosen for me 8 years earlier. This ring was art. A vintage Edwardian setting with a center diamond surrounded by sapphires, intricate metalwork that belonged in a museum. It reminded me of you, he said. Classic but unique, beautiful but complex. Worth taking time to appreciate properly. Yes, I said before he could finish his speech. Yes to marrying you. Yes to building a life together. Yes to whatever adventures come next. He slipped the ring on my finger, and it fit perfectly. Everything about this man, this relationship, this life fit perfectly. We married the following spring in a small ceremony at the Art Institute of Chicago, surrounded by impressionist masterpieces and people who genuinely celebrated our happiness. My sister was my maid of honor. Kieran's best friend from architecture school was his best man. Beckham didn't attend. He'd married his young girlfriend in a quick courthouse ceremony 6 months earlier, apparently determined to prove he could move on faster than I could. According to Kieran's mother, it was already showing signs of strain. Some people learn from their mistakes, she confided during our reception. Others just repeat them with different people. I didn't waste energy thinking about Beckham's new marriage. I was too busy living in my own. For our honeymoon, Kieran and I spent 3 weeks in Greece, island hopping through the Aegean. We swam in impossibly blue waters, explored ancient ruins, and ate fresh seafood while watching sunsets that made me understand why poets had been writing about Greek islands for thousands of years. Where to next? Kieran asked on our last night in Santorini. Home, I said. I want to start our real life together. What does our real life look like? I thought about it as we watched the sun disappear into the sea. It looks like Sunday mornings reading different sections of the newspaper and sharing interesting articles. It looks like cooking dinner together and trying new recipes. It looks like supporting each other's careers and celebrating each other's successes. It looks like growing old together while still saying yes to adventures. Exactly. 2 years later, I graduated with my master's degree in art history. Kieran flew my entire family in for the ceremony, including my parents, my sister, and even my elderly grandmother who rarely traveled. After the ceremony, we had dinner at the best restaurant in Chicago, the kind of celebration Beckham would have considered an unnecessary expense. What's next for Dr. Cross? Kieran asked, using my new title. Museum work, maybe curating, definitely more travel to research exhibitions. Sounds expensive, he said with a grin. Good thing I married rich. You married smart. The rich part is just a bonus. That fall, I was offered a position as assistant curator at the Art Institute's European Paintings department. My first exhibition would focus on women artists of the Belle Époque, and I'd have a budget to travel to Paris and London for research. 6 weeks in Europe for work, I told Kieran over dinner. Want to come with me? Try to stop me. It won't be all tourist stuff. I'll be working most days. I'll amuse myself. Maybe scout locations for the firm's European expansion. You're thinking about expanding to Europe? I'm thinking about following my wife's career wherever it leads. That's when I knew I'd marry the right man. Not because he was willing to follow me, but because he saw my career as something worth following. Our life settled into a rhythm that was both comfortable and exciting. Kieran designed sustainable buildings that won awards and changed cityscapes. I curated exhibitions that brought important art to public attention. We traveled for work and pleasure, collecting experiences like some people collect possessions. We bought a house together. Not because we needed more space, but because we wanted to create something together. A Victorian mansion in Lincoln Park that we renovated room by room, choosing every detail together. No compromise, no resignation, just two people building a space that reflected both of their tastes. The house had a library where I could spread out research materials, and a studio where Kieran could work on personal projects. It had a garden where we grew herbs for the elaborate meals we cooked together. It had guest rooms for the family and friends who visited regularly, drawn by our obvious happiness. 3 years into our marriage, my phone rang while I was preparing for the opening of my Belle Époque exhibition. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Haley? It's me, Beckham. I hadn't heard his voice in over 2 years. What can I do for you? I asked politely. I wanted to congratulate you on your exhibition. I saw the article in the Tribune. Thank you. And I wanted to apologize for everything, for the way our marriage ended, for the way I treated you, for not appreciating what I had. I waited for him to continue. My marriage ended last month, he said. Turns out when you marry someone for their youth and appearance, you don't have much left when the novelty wears off. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Really? I considered the question seriously. Was I sorry that Beckham was unhappy? Yes, despite everything. I didn't wish pain on him. Was I sorry that his second marriage had failed? Not really. Some people needed to learn lessons the hard way. I'm sorry you're hurting, I said finally, but I'm not sorry about the choices that led us here. Do you ever think about what might have happened if I hadn't been such an idiot? If I'd supported your dreams instead of dismissing them? No, I said honestly. I don't think about alternative histories. I'm too busy living in the present. You sound happy. I am happy. Kieran's good to you? Kieran sees me, really sees me. He encourages me to be my best self instead of a smaller version of myself. I never meant to make you smaller. I know, but impact matters more than intent. After we hung up, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. Not for the choices Beckham had made, but for the life he was living. Still seeking external validation, still measuring success in terms of what others thought, still not understanding that happiness came from building something meaningful rather than possessing something impressive. That night, at the opening of my exhibition, I stood surrounded by the fruits of 3 years of research and planning. The gallery was full of people. Art lovers, collectors, critics, colleagues, all engaged with work I'd brought to light. Paintings by women who'd been forgotten by history, now displayed with the reverence they deserved. Kieran found me standing in front of my favorite piece, a self-portrait by a French artist who'd been overshadowed by her more famous husband during her lifetime. Proud of yourself? He asked. Deeply. You should be. This is extraordinary work. A reporter from Art News approached us for an interview about the exhibition. As she asked questions about my research and discoveries, I realized something profound. This was the life I'd been meant to live all along. Not the smaller, safer version I'd accepted during my first marriage, but this expanded, ambitious, meaningful version. What's next for you professionally? The reporter asked. I'm working on a book about overlooked women artists of the period, and there's talk of a sister exhibition in Paris next year. Will your husband be joining you for the research trips? I looked at Kieran, who was beaming with pride. Wild horses couldn't keep him away, I said. After the reporter moved on, Kieran pulled me close. A book? He asked. When did you decide to write a book? About 5 minutes ago, but it feels right. It sounds like another adventure. Are you ready for another adventure? With you? Always. As we walked through the gallery, greeting guests and discussing the artwork, I thought about the phone call from Beckham, his question about alternative histories. What if he'd been different? What if our marriage had worked? But those were the wrong questions. The right question was, what if I'd never found the courage to leave? What if I'd stayed in that safe, small life, convincing myself that contentment was enough? I would have missed all of this. The career that challenged and fulfilled me, the marriage that expanded rather than contracted my world, the version of myself that was brave enough to want more and strong enough to pursue it. No regrets, I murmured as we stood before the final painting in the exhibition. About what? Kieran asked. About any of it. About leaving him, choosing you, blowing up my entire life to build a better one. Good, he said, kissing my temple. Because this is just the beginning. He was right. At 35, I felt like I was just getting started. There were books to write, exhibitions to curate, places to see, dreams to pursue. There was a marriage to nurture and a life to build and adventures waiting around every corner. 5 years earlier, I'd been a woman who apologized for taking up space. Now I was a woman who claimed her space unapologetically. I'd learned the difference between settling and thriving, between existing and living, between being grateful for scraps and insisting on the whole feast. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. Saw the exhibition photos online. You look radiant. So proud of you for choosing happiness. I typed back, best decision I ever made. And it was. Not just leaving Beckham, but choosing to believe I deserved more, choosing to pursue my dreams instead of talking myself out of them, choosing a partner who saw my ambitions as assets rather than inconveniences. As we left the gallery that night, I took one last look at my exhibition. Tomorrow, hundreds of people would see these forgotten masterpieces, would learn about these overlooked artists, would perhaps be inspired to dig deeper into art history themselves. I'd created something meaningful. I'd contributed to the world's understanding of art and history. I'd built a career that mattered. Ready to go home, Dr. Cross? Kieran asked. Ready, I said, taking his hand. Home. Not just a place, but a person. Not just shelter, but sanctuary. Not just where I lived, but where I belonged. We drove through the Chicago streets toward our house, our sanctuary filled with art and books and the evidence of a life well lived. Tomorrow, I'd start working on that book. Next month, we'd begin planning the Paris exhibition. Next year, we'd travel somewhere new, see something beautiful, add another chapter to our story. But tonight, I was simply grateful. Grateful for the courage to leave when leaving felt impossible. Grateful for the chance to start over when starting over felt terrifying. Grateful for a love that made me more myself instead of less. Grateful for learning that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself, and for the people who love you, is to stop settling for good enough and start insisting on extraordinary. As we pulled into our driveway, I looked at the house we'd created together. Warm light spilled from the windows. Garden beds I'd planted flourished along the walkway. This was what home looked like when two people built it together as equals, as partners, as believers in each other's dreams. What are you thinking about? Kieran asked as we sat in the car for a moment. I'm thinking about how different my life would be if you hadn't agreed to be my hall pass. You would have found your way out eventually. You're too smart to stay somewhere you don't belong. Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to find out. Me too. We walked into our house hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. ready for the adventures and challenges and joys that lay ahead, ready for a lifetime of building something beautiful together. And in the end, that was what marriage should be. Two people committed to helping each other become the best versions of themselves. Two people who said yes to each other's dreams instead of finding reasons to say no. Two people who understood that love wasn't about possession or control, but about liberation and support. I'd learned that lesson the hard way, but I learned it completely. And now I was living it every single day, in every conversation, every decision, every moment of a life that was finally, completely, unapologetically mine. The story that had started with a husband's selfish proposition had become something infinitely better, a woman's journey to claiming the life she deserved. And if that wasn't a happy ending worth fighting for, I didn't know what was.